Hello, nonprofit rock stars and heroes. This is Tom Check with Greater Impact Consulting, where we help you streamline your Salesforce in your organization so that you can focus on creating a greater impact in your community. Today, we're talking about something that's really important and that is also really easy to not do, unfortunately, and that is to back up your data. This is important, especially if you're going to be doing massive updates to your system. But even just on a regular basis, it's really important to have a backup of your data in case you need to go back through and find something that got changed recently. Thankfully, Salesforce has a function that's built for this that can schedule it on a monthly basis so that you have a regular backup available to you. So let's dive in real quick and show you how this works. So the first thing you're going to need to do is open up Salesforce, obviously, and go to Setup. And in your quick find box, if you type up data export, you'll only get one answer here. If we click on data export, you'll see on the next page that it tells me that there is no scheduled export, right? If this is what your org says, let's schedule one so that you can get your data backed up. You could run an export now, but what I'd highly recommend is scheduling a regular export. When this screen opens, there's a couple of things you need to do just to make sure that it's set up correctly. First, you need to make sure which frequency you're going to have this export run on. It's going to run once a month, but is it going to run on a certain day of the month, or is it going to run on the first Sunday, the second Tuesday, whatever day works best for you? My experience has been that having this show up on like a Tuesday morning at 2 o'clock in the morning is really convenient because I'm not stuck in the like Monday craziness of catch up from weekend stuff. But I am, rolling the ball for the week and so able to kind of manage it. Whatever works for you, obviously, is going to be what you'll do. The start time is going to, by default, be set for today. And by default, the end time is set for next month. You're probably going to want to change this. Maybe so that it runs for a year, maybe so that it runs for 5 years, just so that you don't have to worry about forgetting this. So what I might do is I might select 2026, select the end of February, and know that that's going to happen. We do have to set our preferred start time. This is not a guaranteed start time because what happens is your scheduled export will enter the queue, and depending on how many other jobs Salesforce is managing right then, it might take a couple minutes for it to start. My general recommendation is to have this run in the middle of the night when nobody is entering data, most likely. And that just means that you can be pretty sure that nobody was in the middle of entering something when the export happens, so that you've got a really clean start and end date for each backup session. So let's say 1 a.m. Now, by default, I would always say export all data, especially if you don't know exactly what all the objects are that your org is working with, or you're not sure which ones need to be backed up and which ones don't need to be backed up. With the default settings, if you include all data, the backup size is still going to be really small. Now that being said, your backup size is really determined not just by the number of records, but especially by whether or not you're including images, documents, and additional files in there. If you check those boxes, your backup size is going to go from a couple of megabytes, maybe 10 megabytes tops, to probably a couple hundred megabytes, maybe up to a gigabyte, maybe even more, depending on how many files and attachments and documents you've got in your org. For most orgs, what I recommend is, by default, don't include the documents and images unless you know you need them. If your org heavily relies on documents, images, attachments, then by all means include those, and just budget your storage space accordingly. If you're going to get a once a month download that's a gigabyte, you're going to want to make sure that you've got room for that either on your computer or, probably even a better idea, on like a cloud storage like a Google Drive or a Dropbox that allows you to store this and have anybody in your team access it in case your computer goes down. So once you include the items that you want, all you have to do is hit save. What will happen then is that once a month, you'll get an email. And by you, I mean the person setting up the scheduled export. A couple of important things to know are that only one person can have a scheduled export running at any given time in your org. So if you set one up, your other users in your org can't then also go set up their own scheduled exports. It just doesn't work that way. So you can have one scheduled export per month in your org. Now there might be some differences and some extenuating circumstances on that, but by default, that would be what I would say to recommend. Another important thing to recognize is that the email that you get won't actually have the attachment with the backup. It is a link that brings you essentially back to this page where you can download the zip file of your backup for 48 hours after that link is sent to you. So it is kind of important that when you get the email, you go ahead and click the link, follow it over to Salesforce, and download the zip file then, because after 48 hours, it disappears. Like I said, the other important part is to make sure that you are backing this up somewhere that's accessible to the users in your org if they need it or if your computer goes down. So once you've got that zip file, especially if it's a small one like a 5 megabyte, just copy it to a backups folder for Salesforce in whatever your cloud storage solution is. It'll save you a ton of time down the road. If you open up that zip file, you'll see that it's got a bunch of different CSV files and a bunch of XML files in there that actually have the data you need that are your records in Salesforce. Another important thing to recognize is that this type of backup is only for the data. It's only for the actual records and the fields that already exist on your records. If you change what's called the metadata or the settings of Salesforce, if you go in and add new objects, or if you go in and add new fields, or if you change validation rules, if you change page layouts, if you change automations, that stuff is not necessarily saved in this backup. If you create a custom object and then you run a scheduled export, it will save up the records for that object. But if you had to start fresh in Salesforce, that custom object isn't going to show up and you can't get it from your backup. If that makes sense. So that's a couple of things to be aware of as you interact with these exports. Is it's just your data. It's not the metadata. It's not your page layouts, your page validation, your field validations, your flows and your process builders. None of that gets backed up, just the data itself. You can only have one per month that's scheduled, and you have to download it within 48 hours of them sending you that email link. Otherwise, it disappears and you got to wait. Other than that, those are the big pieces for doing a data backup. There is a way to do a metadata backup, but that would be another video because that's a little more involved and the type of thing that you probably wouldn't do regularly unless you're making a lot of changes to the infrastructure of your Salesforce org on a regular basis. So those are the basics. Go ahead and set up your scheduled export in your organization today, because I would hate for you to hire a consultant or to do a major data update on your own and mess up. And I've seen it happen plenty of times where we run that data loader and we update 2,000 files and we realize, oopsie, messed all of those up. And it takes a lot more effort to go fix all of those 2,000 records often than just to go back to your backup and re-import that stuff and update it. So that's the video for the day. I hope this is useful. If you have any questions or concerns, of course, don't hesitate to reach out. And until next time, continue creating that greater impact in your community by wrangling your Salesforce into control.